Are we streaming? We are, in fact, streaming. Streaming now. Let's see if we're live. We are so live. Let me drop this into public. Let me drop this to the VC. I'll see if people want to jump in. Let's go. And had to hop on that call. If you guys can't read titles, then you'll have to guess as to what this topic is.
Oh, fantastic. The after show was...
What is up? How's it going?
So, I'll put it in the Discord. Well, we haven't said anything shady.
Oh, you haven't?
Not in our... I don't know how you all do this. So I maximize my screen on Discord when I'm streaming. But then if someone wants me to put something in the Discord links, I have to minimize my screen, which means everyone on my channel can see our conversation that we had. We haven't said anything crazy, so...
Well, there's a, I'm not sure if you have two monitors, but there's like a pop-out function on Discord. Like if you hover over the part where our cameras are in the bottom right corner of that, there's a button that says pop out.
Rob, they might see all the inwards you said earlier.
Don't scroll up. Don't scroll up.
As in, no, I will not send you flowers to those inwards. But no, I'm good to go. Sinthe, I know we're going to do quick intros. Do you want to go first or second?
I'll go second.
I'm going to go second. Because you were the challenger. Normally the challenger goes first, but I don't care. I'll go first if you want.
I'm either or. I go both ways, one might say.
Well, why don't you go first since you have a problem with what I said, and I can
sure.
What your problem is. Because, I mean, I know Micah doesn't know much about this. Basically, the impetus is this, I said some things on Twitter that you were like, do you think you could defend this? And I said, sure. So.
Sure. Yeah, on Twitter you said, that you think it's the case that like that manifesto from the shooter or the potential shooter was indicative of that shooter being some kind of Vaush fan and Vaush also being a stochastic terrorist because of this. Then I challenge you like, hey, do you want to debate if this is actually indicative of Vaush being a stochastic terrorist? Is this manifesto indicative of that? If you want, since it seems like you want me to go ahead and just do the opening here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I didn't know if Micah wanted to introduce himself.
I would think so.
Shoot. This sucks. The Discord sucks so bad for me, but
it's all good.
For some reason, I don't know if anytime I switch cameras, like to the I'm sorry, because I only have one monitor. Anytime I switch to being able to use my browser. On my stream, everyone's camera shows up as black. I have no idea why it does that, but we'll just deal with it. As long as people can hear it.
Yeah, I guess we can all introduce ourselves then, right? Like,
luckily, our voices sound different enough, so I don't think that there'll be any confusion if the camera goes away quickly. Who's who? But yeah, you go ahead and start. That's fine. Whenever you're ready, Micah. If you didn't want to introduce yourself, this is Micah.
I want Micah to introduce himself. Is that okay?
That's fine by me.
Okay.
Hey, my name is Micah. I talk about economics a lot. That's my main thing. I don't talk about social policy or Vaush or Destiny. I don't really know very much about their dramas at all. But if you wanna learn about me and see my newsletter and the YouTube videos I create sometimes, just look at my name, Micah Irfan, MICAHERFAN. You can find anything and everything I've ever done in my life because I'm the only Micah Irfan on Earth. So it's pretty great.
All right. Rob, you want to introduce yourself? I'm streaming as well.
Yeah, I can introduce. I'm Rob Noerr. I consider myself a populist conservative. I stream on Rumble, Twitch, and now on Kick. Yeah, that's all there is to say. It's good.
Sure. And I go by Sinthe online, Sinthe. I'm on YouTube. That's just about it.
Fantastic. Right. Okay, you have 2 minutes for your opening, Sinthe.
Cool. Yeah, sure. So Rob is of the position that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist, and that's indicated by this manifesto from the Whitmore shooter, or the Whitmore attempted, or not even attempted, but Whitmore potential shooter. This person who might have ended up shooting someplace up if they weren't grabbed by the cops first. So the only evidence that we have that Vaush is at all connected to this person ends up being through an affidavit, which mentioned a list of names on a manifesto. The list of names on that manifesto as listed by the affidavit was Eric and Dylan, losers. It kind of goes on in this pattern with a name and then his description. Adam Lanza, too smart. Israel Keys, degenerate. Lauren Southern, pathetic. Vaush, terrorist. Donald J. Trump, con man. Bad cops, useless garbage. And then Stockholm, common name, Liam K. So it seems to go over a list of individuals and then criticisms of these individuals, attacks on these individuals' characters, calling Donald Trump a con man, Lauren Southern pathetic, and Vaush a terrorist. And this is the indication on Rob Noerr's end that this person not only knew about Vaush, but was encouraged by Vaush. That Vaush is in fact a stochastic terrorist who motivated this person to potentially end up being a shooter. I think it's insane. I think that the affidavit speaks for itself. Clearly, this person was not a Vaush fan. Clearly, this is not indicative that this person is a Vaush fan. It's not even remotely strong evidence of that. But that's mine. If you want to go, Rob, you can go ahead.
Okay. So the problem is that Sinthe and a bunch of Vaush fans have misinterpreted what I said. We could go word for word with the tweets I said. Never once did I claim that this person was inspired by Vaush. What had happened was I'd been making videos about this particular topic for about 10 months now. Vaush did a video with a left-wing streamer where he was talking about the need for violence for the trans cause because there's a trans genocide. This is a topic that is near and dear to me because I, more than almost anyone I know, have condemned all sorts of political violence and have been arguing with people on the right, left, and everyone in between about the need to not call for political violence, because for us to be able to have debate, we need to have a set of ground rules on the type of behaviors that we think are acceptable. And if you say I could punch someone, I could shoot someone because I disagree with them politically, then that makes that debate irrelevant. So thereby any conversation you could have would be irrelevant. Now, what I did say to Vaush after the first trans shooter that we saw in Tennessee, I messaged him and said that seeing as how Vaush is quick to call right-wingers and the entire GOP stochastic terrorist, is he willing now that we see a left-winger from a community that he has an affinity for and says there's a genocide against, the trans community, is he now willing to have a conversation about how his own rhetoric could potentially make him a stochastic terrorist? I talked to a left-winger named Sansel, who had a very similar take to me, and both of us kind of mused that we would not put it beyond seeing as how the prevalency of the trans community on online spaces for a potential trans shooter to actually have seen videos of Vaush's, believe there's a genocide, and actually have Vaush's name potentially show up in a manifesto. Obviously, we don't know that he was in that original manifesto, but ironically, less than a week later, we have another trans would-be shooter, and this time Vaush's name was mentioned. Now, this doesn't mean that this person is saying, I like Vaush or not. They'll argue against Sinthe on the idea that because he calls him a terrorist, that means that he doesn't like him. But what it means is this person at least knew of Vaush. And so I once more asked Vaush, are you ready to talk about stochastic terrorism? That's
okay,
what and we could get into.
Was that the 2 minutes?
I did not say Vaush was stochastic terrorism.
Well, hold on, Rob. That was 2 minutes, right? Yeah, so you do in fact seem to be implying on Twitter that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist. You posted a picture of this. You posted a picture of this person's the list of names of the affidavit. Then you said, "Hi Vaush, I know you are really concerned about stochastic terrorism. Now that it would be trans mass shooter had your name in his manifesto, care to comment on your claims of a trans genocide and the need to shoot patriot prayer?" It seems like you are, in fact, trying to imply that this manifesto is in some way evidence, some way indicative of Vaush being a stochastic terrorist. That was the prop you agreed to on Twitter.
Where does that prompt say, where does that tweet say that I'm saying Vaush is a stochastic terrorist?
The prop you agreed to in my tweet on Twitter, the tweet that I said was, would you like to debate if this manifesto is indicative of Vaush being a stochastic terrorist? And you said yes. And now it seems like you want to say no and you want to run away from that.
From our Twitter DMs. If you want to do a debate on the Vaush name in the manifesto, I am down. I will defend my tweets, and you can present whatever argument you have about them.
No need to go DMs. I said right open on Twitter on April 7th, hey Rob, are you down to debate if this indicates Vaush is a stochastic terrorist? Not sure if there's going to be much material since you pretty clearly misread it. Now you want to run away from that.
What was my response?
Your response was, I'll scroll down here. Yep, I'm in for sure. Then I said, sounds great. Let's see if we can find a mod.
Listen. I told you in the DMs what I was willing to debate about. You can try to make it seem like I'm specifically calling it stochastic terrorism because that's not what my tweet.
That's the prop of this debate. There's the tweet.
The way it works, I sit here and listen to you talk. Now you'll listen to me talk, right? You accuse me of not apparently being able to read, seeing as how you think that this man...
You couldn't read the prop.
One person at a time.
Thank you. The irony is you couldn't read what I actually wrote. I'm willing to defend my tweets, is what I was always willing to do. You understand that you can't defend your criticism of strawmanning my tweets, and so you're begging me to defend something that I didn't say. I'm willing to defend each and every tweet I made. I'm willing to defend my opening statement. The fact that you misread the tweets, just like all Vaush would-be sycophant defenders of trans terrorism have done. That's not...
I'm a Vaush sycophant now?
Seems
the only interactions I've ever had with Vaush have been debating the guy and challenging him to a debate. And like he blocked me on Twitter for calling him a pedophile. I'm by no means a Vaush fan. I'm incredibly critical of the guy, but I'm also very critical of people who fucking lie, which is what you did, Rob. Hey, Rob, are you down to debate if this indicates Vaush is a stochastic terrorist? Not sure if there's going to be much material since you pretty clearly misread it. Then you say, yep, I'm in for sure. Right? If you want, you can pull up those tweets. Go ahead and pull up those tweets to your audience. Go ahead and pull up those tweets.
Okay, so I love the one. Well, you have to defend what you said. Can you defend what my...
You agreed to a debate on this topic, and now you're weaseling away. You're weaseling Rob. That's what you do.
Okay, so you asked if I would... Go ahead and read again what you think the prompt is.
What I think the prompt is what the prompt is. Hey, Rob, are you down to debate if this indicates Vaush is a stochastic terrorist? Question mark. Then you say, yep, I'm in for sure.
You ready? Possibly.
If what indicate sure, are you saying if this is possibly indicative of that?
And let me explain why.
Possibly what?
He's a stochastic terrorist.
We're not talking about if it's possible he's a stochastic terrorist. It's possible you're a stochastic terrorist. It's possible anybody's a stochastic terrorist. What we're debating is this indicative of that? Is this indicative of that?
Yes.
This is possibly indicative of that?
Yes.
Why is this evidence Vaush is a stochastic terrorist?
Well, because Vaush has said things about there being a trans genocide. Second, he has said that there's a need to shoot people that he disagrees with. Third, this proves that this person at least knew Vaush. Fourth, in order to prove 100% someone was a stochastic terrorism, even if they were listed in a manifesto, it wouldn't prove it. So this rises to the level of being evidence that this person at least heard Vaush.
Why is this evidence? You just named two background facts. You didn't name evidence. You named background facts. Why is this evidence?
Just let him finish and then you can go.
This proves that this person at least knew who Vaush was. Vaush has talked about the need to shoot people he disagrees with and said there's a trans genocide. So, yes, possibly. I'm sorry that you misread what my tweets were, but I am defending your ridiculous...
You're running.
I'm not running.
You're very clearly running away from the prop you agreed to.
Defended what you wanted me to defend in the prompt.
You didn't. What you just named is two examples of background information and nothing that shows that this is going to be evidence. So if I said, Rob, no, if I said that like you drinking water just now is evidence you have diabetes, right? And then I said you've admitted to having diabetes in the past, that wouldn't mean that that's evidence you have diabetes. That's some other background information. Do you understand that would be other background information?
Okay. Look, if you would like to, let me ask you this. Hypothetically, if this manifesto said...
Answer my question. Don't ask me a question. Answer mine.
Yes, it could be possible proof.
You drinking water is evidence?
You can say if Rob has admitted in the past that he had diabetes and
You didn't hear the question.
Of waters, that could be a signal that he potentially is further proof that he's diabetic.
You're not answering the question. I'm telling you, if the reason I give is background information, yeah, Rob, if the reason I give is some background information, that does not mean you doing some action is going to be evidence. If I say Rob putting a hat on is evidence he has diabetes because in the past he has admitted to having diabetes, that wouldn't be true. That doesn't make that evidence. That's background information. Evidence is something that raises the probability of something being true. Evidence is not, here is some random fact, plus we have background information.
Is there any amount of evidence that would 100% be certain that someone was a stochastic terrorism based on the manifesto?
You haven't provided any kind of evidence. I didn't ask for certain evidence.
I'm asking you a question.
I didn't ask for certain evidence.
Okay, so what you're doing then is you're playing a semantic game because you would always be able to say, well, even if this manifesto was said Vaush inspired me, you would say, well, that doesn't prove that he's
of course not.
Terrorist.
That would be evidence that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist.
The evidence is that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist because...
Do you understand? Go ahead.
Let me finish. Part of the evidence is Vaush is a stochastic terrorist based on his own definition, which is the definition we should go by. Second, based on the fact that he's been hyperbolic and called for a trans genocide. And third, unlike the people he criticized, he actually called for shooting those that he disagrees with. It's evidence of stochastic terrorism because his words show that he is a stochastic terrorism or terrorist, and this person, by citing Vaush's name, proves that he at least knows of Vaush. So that is evidence. It might not be proof positive that this person was inspired by Vaush, but it is evidence that this person at least knew Vaush, who is a stochastic terrorist.
You think that this person is not a stochastic terrorist? They're just a normal crazy person who wants to go shoot up a school. There's nothing stochastic about that. So this individual, knowing who Vaush is, does not give you any kind of evidence that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist. You naming a bunch of background information trying to move the topic off, is Vaush or is Vaush not a stochastic terrorist? The answer is obviously no. By your standards, you could say by Vaush's standard and call him a hypocrite all you want, but by your standards, he's not. So that's irrelevant from the topic. Stop, Rob, listen. So if you're trying to say this is indicative of Vaush being a stochastic terrorist, why does this raise the probability that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist?
Because this person knows of Vaush. My tweet originally was about whether or not Vaush is willing to have a conversation of the things he criticizes others about being a stochastic terrorism. And now, as I predicted, eventually it would be likely that his name would show up in some trans person's manifesto. And is he willing to now hold him
with a critical comment beside it?
What we can talk about the comment. Now, I would like to talk about something a little more meta here. I understand as someone as feminine as you need.
Let's not talk about
by trying to control the conversation.
Rob, if I had tits as big as yours, I'd feel really feminine.
I'm not going to listen to you try to browbeat me like you're someone who spurgs out.
Hold on, Rob, chill out. Relax. The moderator wants to pipe in or something. Hold on, relax.
No, I was just saying, like, we don't need to make it really personal. We can try to talk about the topic at hand. I understand that you might want to shift what the debate is about. We can do that. Maybe we can find a new specific statement we want to debate, so we can make sure this is productive.
I told him in the DMs what I was willing to debate. He knew that that was the conversation that we were going to have. It is not my fault that he misread what I was going to say. He won't touch with a 10-foot pole, just like Vaush and his sycophantic followers won't touch, because they know there's no defense of what Vaush said. And Sinthe is someone who probably has an affinity for the trans community. I don't know if he's trans himself. Wants to cover up, just like all the people in the mainstream media, the stochastic terrorism that comes from left-wing voices that constantly talk about a trans genocide and talk about, belittling the violence that they commit and shit like that. And so that's what Sinthe wants to do.
There's not a single person on the planet who thinks I'm not critical enough of Vaush, Rob.
I didn't see the DMs.
Hold on, Rob. I didn't misread anything about your tweet. You agreed to a prop and you don't want to back it up because you understand you were wrong. There's not a single aspect of a potential shooter who didn't actually go commit that crime, be it like knowing who Vaush is, that proves that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist or even provides evidence of that. If it was the case that like, let's give an example, right? If it's the case that this mass shooter knows who Lauren Southern is this evidence that Lauren Southern is a stochastic terrorist?
No.
So the same evidence you provided for Vaush, I can provide for Lauren Southern. But this isn't for Vaush and it is for Lauren Southern.
Okay. Are you willing to admit that I never said that this was evidence that Vaush was...
Respond to the argument that I just said. You agreed to a debate on the proposition. You're saying I spaz out, but look at you. You're freaking out, right? The evidence that you just provided was this person knew who Vaush was. This person knew who Vaush was because in their manifesto, it says Vaush, terrorist. Right above that, it says Lauren Southern, pathetic.
I'll leave Micah tell me when I can respond. You can't control yourself, so Micah can tell me.
Go ahead.
All right. You asked me you can't even be good faith about what's going on in this debate. You asked me a question specifically. Unlike you, and I know this is weird for you lefties, when you asked me a question, I directly responded. So you
haven't.
Does this prove...
Continue.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Micah, I'll wait until Micah tells me I can go. I know that Sinthe is someone with low self-esteem, needs to interrupt all the time to feel good about himself. So,
don't interrupt. Okay, Rob, you'll continue.
Okay, thank you. So you asked me directly, Lauren Southern's name was mentioned. Does that mean she's a stochastic terrorist? To which I responded, no. You are incapable as a lefty of being able to interpret answers like that as actual answers. So you spurred out and go, so you're willing to answer when I clearly answered in the most succinct way possible. Now, the point I was trying to make is, did I once say that this was proof that Vaush was a stochastic terrorism?
We're not talking about proof. We're talking about it being indicative. And you said yes. You did, in fact, say yes. You said, yep, I'm in for sure, when I asked you if you wanted to debate that.
I will ask you again, did I ever, you could say that
Yes.
I wanted to debate. So I said, so you saying, do you want to debate this means that my tweet said that?
Do you want to debate this? And you answered yes. You answered yes.
Okay, well, so if I said, do you want to debate communism? And you said yes, and I say, you say you're a communist. You
If me and you are debating communism, then one of us is going to defend communism.
So that doesn't mean that that was what your tweets had said.
If you asked me, do I want to debate communism, and I said yes, I think it'd be pretty reasonable for you to assume that I'm the communist.
I will ask you again. Did my tweet say that this was proof that Vaush was a stochastic terrorist that inspired this person?
You agreed to a debate on that proposition, you weasel.
I will ask you again. Did my tweets ever say that
It's irrelevant. You want me to provide a direct I have to have a verbatim quote in your tweet to have that interpretation that you agreed to debate on?
I will ask you for the 5th time. Did any of my tweets say that this was...
It's irrelevant. I'll say it for the 5th time. It's irrelevant.
So, just so you can see, so Sinthe accused me of not being able to respond to questions, which
I just responded 5 times in a row.
I'll wait again.
The answer is, the response is, it's irrelevant.
Okay, Rob, you can go.
So Sinthe accuses me, as always, as lefties always do, of exactly what he does. He is unable to respond to question directly, and so he has to continue to spurg out and say he accuses me of not answering directly when that's exactly what I do. So I'll ask...
How direct can he be?
Did any of my tweets ever say that this was proof that Vaush incited this person?
Rob, are you have you been genetically interbred with a goldfish or something? Because you've asked that question 5 times, and I've answered every time, it's irrelevant. And I told you why.
Instead of having a debate, what we'll do is I'll speak.
Do you need it in the form of a yes or a no?
Oh, don't interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
So because Sinthe is unwilling to engage in a debate, what we'll do is I agreed to be here. I'll leave him have his time to speak. I'll continue to talk about my point, and you can see how when someone comes in that had a problem with my tweets and said that obviously I was unable to read, which is exactly what Sinthe said. He said that it was going to be a short debate because clearly I was unable to read. That's because Sinthe misinterpreted and read something into my tweets that wasn't there. He's now trying to say because I said I was willing to debate this topic that means I have to debate what he thought my tweets originally said. Nowhere did I say that this was proof that this person was motivated by Vaush. I said that Vaush was a stochastic terrorist by the very definition of what Vaush claims the entire GOP is, because unlike the GOP, Vaush has been incredibly hyperbolic when it comes to the trans genocide issue, and he has specifically called for violence, which the members of the GOP he's criticized hasn't done. And that was the entire messaging of my tweet, that this proves that Vaush is known by this person, and that we need to have a conversation. That's what I wanted to have about Vaush. I'm sorry that Sinthe was unwilling to read the DMs and see exactly what I was willing to debate.
Our messages are public, Rob. You can see the tweet that you agreed to debate. You can see the proposition you agreed to debate. Everyone can go check. There's no point in lying.
Why would you ask that prompt if my tweets never said that I was blaming?
Because a reasonable person who read your tweet would come to that interpretation because you posted a screenshot of a potential shooter's manifesto and started saying, Vaush, do you want to talk about how you've talked about stochastic terrorism in the past? And then you talked about how there's a person could reasonably induct from this, that this person might have been influenced by Vaush. Correct. You think this person, you could reasonably induct that this person might have been influenced by Vaush.
Yes.
Then you do, in fact, think the thing that is the prompt. You think yes is the answer to that prompt.
Can a reasonable person think that he might have been influenced by Vaush?
That you can induct that from this, that this is indicative that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist.
That's not the question you just asked.
What do you think a stochastic terrorist is?
Please, the question you just asked me was, could a reasonable person induce that
Induct.
Can a reasonable person induct that he might have been influenced by Vaush?
That's what I just asked you. What do you think a stochastic terrorist is?
Yes.
Okay, you think this is indicative that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist. Because a reasonable person might induct that.
Why do you keep changing the question?
I haven't.
You have. Your question, correct me if I'm wrong, is can a reasonable person induct that this person
You just said that.
influenced by Vaush?
What part of this is confusing to you?
Because you're then changing it. Go ahead. Say what you're going to say again.
Go answer my question.
What? I'll say yes.
You'll say yes to my question?
Yes. Your question is, can a reasonable person induct that this person might have...
No. That was a question a while ago. I did ask that question in this conversation, but that was not the question I just asked you.
Then ask the next question.
I asked you what part of that is confusing. And your answer was yes?
Your question that you asked originally is not confusing. I answered yes.
What part of that is confusing? What part of my line of logic? Not my question. What part of my line of logic was confusing to you?
None of it. I understand your line of logic. My answer is still yes.
Your answer to what? So you understand my line of logic.
Yes.
No part of it's confusing.
No.
Okay. And you understand how I got from your answer to that question to this is you agreeing to the proposition.
I understand you're a whiner and you're unwilling to talk about what my tweets actually said. The question you just asked me, it is not confusing. I will answer again, yes. What part of my answer is confusing?
Holy shit.
I think Rob's position is that it's that somebody could induct that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist and he influenced this person.
Yes.
Manifesto is not evidence. That's not evidence you're counting in favor of.
Let me. Are you having?
Is that your position, Micah? Oh, sorry, Rob?
I know it's a three-letter word. This might be difficult. The question was, can a reasonable person induct that this person might have been influenced by Vaush? My answer was yes. Now, answer yes, that's apparently confusing to both of you. Would you like to know
what? Not confusing.
Yes.
No. Okay. What I'm telling you is, if you think this is the case, that a reasonable person would induct that Vaush might be a stochastic terrorist from this, right?
Yeah.
Then it would be the case that you think this is evidence. Do you not think this is evidence?
This is additional evidence, yes.
So you do, in fact, think that the manifesto is indicative that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist. It is evidence that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist, correct?
It is evidence that this person might have been influenced by Vaush.
That was not the question you were just asked, or unless you think it is.
I'm answering the original question you asked. You're now asking a separate question, which is what I...
That's how conversations work. What?
Ask a question, then you move the
goalpost. It's not moving the goalpost. Just answer the question.
It is moving the goalpost. Yes, this is you can induct that this person might...
You're such a weasel.
Oh my gosh. I'm not a weasel. You're a weasel who's unwilling to debate what
Can I ask?
Said in my tweet.
I'm just going to ask you.
Rob. You want to have the debate?
Rob.
I answered yes.
The answer, yes. Okay, you do in fact think that this manifesto is indicative that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist, yes?
Your question was this?
That's the question I just asked. No, don't remind me the question I just asked seconds ago. We all remember it. Please just answer, Rob.
Now you want something different than the question you asked.
That was the proposition the whole time.
So then the question you asked me earlier wasn't the proposition. That was an irrelevant question.
Is it? Do you think it's the same thing? You understand? I can ask you more questions than just the proposition, and it can be relevant.
Just like I could tell you that you misread my tweets, and we could talk about...
Answer my question.
I did.
No. You're Control-Zing 5 questions ago. You're like skipping backwards in time. We got time traveling Rob here.
Admit that you asked us. Now ask your another question. Since I already said yes, you didn't want to debate the proposition that you asked and said.
What?
You think that a reasonable person could adopt that this person was influenced by Vaush. You don't want to debate that anymore. You now.
The proposition was.
Question.
The proposition is: do you think this is indicative that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist? Is your answer to that yes or no?
I think that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist, and what this shows that this person knew Vaush.
What I asked you is this indicative that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist?
I think that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist, and this post is indicative that this person...
Is that a yes or a no?
I think that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist, and this post is indicative that this person knew Vaush.
Can you answer in the form of a yes or no?
Your question that you asked me is, could a reasonable person induct that this person had been influenced by Vaush? Yes. Seeing as how we know about the words that Vaush has said, where he has been a stochastic terrorist, where he's called for the shooting of right-wing groups.
That was one of the questions I asked, yes.
A trans genocide.
Oh my God.
The fact that this person clearly knows Vaush, then yes, a reasonable...
He's looping.
I'm not looping. I'm answering the question.
Like an NPC is glitching out. Rob, that was a question. That was a question from the past, but a new question. Look, you're faced with a new question, right? The new question is, do you think this is indicative? Vaush is a stochastic terrorist.
I think that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist, and this is indicative that this person knew Vaush and that he might have been inspired by him.
The question was, do you think this is indicative that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist? Could you answer in the format of a yes or no? Is that possible?
No.
It's not possible if you'd answer in the form of a yes or no. Why is it not possible?
Because I choose to answer in the way in which I've answered.
That is, I know you did choose that, but why is it impossible for you to answer in the form of a yes or no?
Let me know when you're done with this line of questioning, and then I'll talk about...
I am not done yet, right? But the question was, why do you think it's impossible to answer in the form of a yes or no to the question, do you think this is indicative that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist?
I'm choosing to answer the question because I think it requires...
I see.
So I'm being succinct.
I see.
In one sentence, I could answer again if that sentence is too long.
That is no. The issue is that I think it's a different. You've asked yourself a different question than answered it, right? I'm asking you just for my question, right? Would your question look? Do you know what? Do you know?
Go ahead.
Do you
give me ample time to discuss?
It's okay. It's okay, Rob. I got you, right? I got you. So,
Okay.
Rob, are you familiar with what's this? There's this idea in philosophy. It's a huge, big idea. It's called the law of the excluded middle. Are you familiar with the idea?
I am.
You're familiar with it? Okay. Do you think that the phrase, this is indicative Vaush is a stochastic terrorist, do you think that would violate the law of the excluded middle?
No, it would not.
Okay. So that would either be true or false, right?
It could be.
Yeah, it was one of those two options, true or false. It's not neither, right?
It could be. Sometimes there can be things that even if it wouldn't violate that law, that require a little more detail. It would be a criticism if I was answering in a way that was lengthy and was unable to pin down on exactly what I'm saying. I'm answering you about 20 times now.
You've answered 0 times actually, right? You asked yourself a different question than you answer that one, right? So the point of me asking you that is you agree there are 2 options for that statement. Either it's true or it's false. Maybe you don't know, and that would be fair. If you didn't know if it was true or false, you could just say you don't know, right? But do you think it's true or false, or do you not know?
I think that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist, and this is indicative that this person knew Vaush.
That was not the question you were asked. The question is...
If you're not giving me...
Is that yes?
I'm just going to head out.
Okay, bye. You're not forced to be here.
Good moderating, man. You did it. So
I think Micah did an excellent job. I'm not going to shit on Micah for this.
I've been in this loop for 10 minutes. I said I
You won't answer.
would say something.
I mean, you can
You say whatever you want.
and then say other stuff.
Okay, so once more, we can see that I'll re-explain that Sinthe read my tweet. I told him exactly in the DMs what I was willing to debate. Me saying that I was willing to debate this topic and then going in further, as is usually what happens. Sinthe knows this as a person who does panels and does debates quite frequently. Oftentimes people agree to a topic in public and then they'll hash out exactly what that topic will be in the DMs. I'm willing to defend the tweets I made. He's trying to make me defend something that I never said with loaded questions. The truth is that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist by the own standards that Vaush is outlet. Now, the reason this is important is as follows. I don't think that Bernie Sanders, for example, who was hyperbolic about the need to end Medicare for all, was responsible when a radical lefty shot up at Republicans in the ball field that was a fan of Bernie Sanders, shooting Steve Scalise and trying to execute a bunch of Republicans. Even though Bernie's language was hyperbolic, I didn't blame him for stochastic terrorism because 2 things. One, unlike Vaush, he wasn't specifically calling stochastic terrorism out on the other side, which he should be held to the same standard. And second, he didn't specifically call for his followers to go shoot people. Vaush did do that. Sinthe doesn't want to debate that, neither does Vaush, neither does anyone on the side. That's exactly what my tweets were talking about. When you engage in rhetoric like this, inevitably people that listen to you that probably are prevalent to mental illness anyways because they're members of the trans community that show those comorbidities and have other sort of illnesses, depression, anxiety, suicidality, etc. It's very dangerous for...
I don't think you want to get to the personal attack area, Rob. Look,
what does that have to do with the personal attack?
It's very, very obviously a personal attack, right? But look, if you, I want to ask you, right, because you wouldn't answer my initial question, but maybe we can get an answer to this question. Do you think that Vaush's metrics for what makes somebody a stochastic terrorist are reasonable metrics?
No.
Do you think that holding Vaush to a metric that you think is unreasonable and saying that's evidence he is in fact a stochastic terrorist would be a reasonable thing to do?
I think that Vaush's metrics for stochastic terrorism are he goes beyond what his own metric was because he actually calls for violence, which I think would meet that metric. But secondly, I think that we should hold people to the standards they seek to hold other people to. So we should hold people to their own standards. Well, I understand.
That's insane.
You don't think that.
No, I think that some people have unreasonable standards, and I think we should hold people to reasonable standards. If somebody has some insane standard, I wouldn't hold them to an insane standard. Right. I think that somebody who holds themselves to the standard of being a perfect person, I wouldn't hold them to that standard because I think it's reasonable to not do that. What I want to ask you, I guess, is In the case of of what you think makes somebody a stochastic terrorist, what do you think a stochastic terrorist is?
I think a stochastic terrorist is someone that is intentionally inciting someone to commit acts of violence. So that hyperbolically says that there is a problem, that the only solution is violence, and then specifically calls for that violence.
Okay, so someone who intentionally incites someone to commit acts of violence, that's sufficient?
If that act of violence would be tantamount to terrorism.
Okay, what do you think qualifies as terrorism?
I think terrorism would be using violence or intimidation for political purposes.
Do you think the founding fathers were stochastic terrorists?
No.
Did they fit your definition?
No.
Did they use violence for political purposes?
The political purpose would have to be one that is engaged by a non-state actor.
Were they state actors?
Yes, they were facilitating their withdrawal and a revolution from the country, thereby creating their own state.
So then if you think if somebody was like a communist revolutionary and they create their own state, then that makes them not a terrorist anymore. Do you think that ISIS aren't terrorists?
If they officially declare war and they are a state and are creating a state, then I would say no.
Is ISIS a state?
What's your definition of terrorism?
Hold on. No, you didn't answer my question. Is ISIS a state? Here comes another Rob Noerr meltdown.
I don't believe ISIS is a state.
What's a state?
A state is a country, a governing body.
That's it?
Yes.
Any governing body? How is ISIS not a governing body?
I answered your questions now. Can you define what terrorism is?
I think that terrorism is an ill-defined term. I don't go around calling people terrorist. Clapping your hands isn't gonna. I've proven it's an ill-defined term.
Now I understand that you radical lefties that want to make excuses for the violence that's now coming up on your side want to play this semantic game. But as you can see,
there's no game, Rob. You have no consistent standard.
I answered a series of questions in rapid-fire succession that you asked me. Now I would like to ask you some. Can you define terrorism?
I just answered this question.
Can you define state?
Yes. A geographic monopoly of force over geographic territory, the same definition that Weber uses.
Okay, so is ISIS a state?
Yes, they're the Islamic State.
Do you think ISIS are terrorists?
Yes.
Can you define terrorism?
No, it's an ill-defined term. I just answered that question.
You think they're terrorists, but you can't define what terrorist is.
Are you familiar with the idea of a semantic primitive?
I am.
What is it?
A semantic primitive is saying that there's some things that are so difficult to define because they're such a primitive, like the word the would be a semantic primitive. Define the word the, correct?
So, almost, right? The idea is just that some things are not defined in terms of more words, but instead are defined ostensibly. You go out and you can see in the world examples of that, right? So we can see in the world and get a family resemblance of what terrorism is, but it's an ill-defined term, right? And so generally, I try not to go around calling people terrorists.
You said,
but you've proven it's ill-defined.
You say that I shouldn't hold Vaush to his own standard because instead we should have an objective standard to what stochastic terrorism means, correct?
No.
That's literally what you said.
My position is that your definition of terrorist is so incredibly void of any kind of content. It includes the founding fathers and doesn't include ISIS.
And I know this is difficult. It's hard for you to keep a thought in your head. The way we got into this conversation, I said, Vaush, the reason I said I wanted to have a conversation with Vaush about this is because the standard he sets forth from the right of what he defines stochastic terrorism. He meets that metric and worse. You said we shouldn't hold Vaush to his own standard because sometimes people's own standard is poor. Therefore, we need to have
You think it's poor.
Objective standard, right? Isn't that what you said?
No, I didn't say objective standard at all.
Okay, so then Okay, so if we...
I asked you about a reasonable standard.
Real quick, so if we shouldn't hold someone to their own standard, what standard should we hold them to?
I think you should hold people to the standard of being moral. I don't think you should hold them to... I don't think it matters. I don't think we should think about morals in terms of... Hold on. Do you want me to define moral?
Yes.
And it complies with stance to minute reason.
Okay, could we each have disagreements on what's moral?
We could have disagreements on anything if it's an objective fact, yeah.
Objective?
Yes, I think morals are objective, yes.
Morals are objective. So,
yes.
So, in other words, just so everyone can see how fucking slippery. Do you see how desperate they are to get out of the conversation of the violence that's...
Rob, you mistracked.
So listen.
Can I remind you, Rob? Rob, can I remind you really fast? Rob, you're mistaken. You said an objective standard for stochastic terrorist.
I'm not going to leave him interrupt me. I understand that's what he needs to do. Do you want to talk about Seekums and shit like you lied the last time you debated Garland Farms?
What are you talking about?
This is what you do. We get it. Right. So what he said was, originally he said, I shouldn't hold Vaush to his own standards. This is the way the left gets out of their double standards that they imply. And he said that's because he said we should have more of an objective standard. He says, no, we shouldn't have an objective standard. We should have a moral standard.
No, you're mistracking.
It's not objective.
Okay. Rob, you've mistracked entirely, right? You said, should we have an objective standard for stochastic terrorists we hold people to? I said, no, we shouldn't be holding people to any kind of objective standard for stochastic terrorists. I didn't mention objective until you asked me what morals are. I do think morals are objective. I diverge from the vast majority of the left on this. I'm a moral realist. The vast majority of them aren't, right? So that's a completely different question. The word objective got invoked there. It's not get invoked in terms of objective standards of stochastic terrorism, because I don't think that morals work by asking what words does this thing fit into. It's not a matter of like what words do you fit into. This is the issue with people who go around like trying to apply the label of eugenics onto things to say that it's morally wrong and so on, right? As opposed to actually addressing the impacts of the action. I think the impacts of the action are worth questioning, and there are plenty of things that I've criticized Vaush on. I wouldn't go into a debate asking, is Vaush a moral person?
It's a moral standard and objective standard.
So ask the question again in the beginning of the sentence.
It's a moral standard and objective standard.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so when you criticize me saying, oh, we shouldn't have an objective standard, we should have a moral standard, you're admitting...
For the term stochastic terrorist.
Right, so you're calling for an objective standard just in the terms, you're couching it in the term morality.
Not for the word stochastic terrorist, but for being moral, yes.
So then how do we determine if someone's a stochastic terrorist?
I think it's an ill-defined term. I told you this several times. Rob, you're in another plane of existence right now. You are not engaging with this debate. Well, you've logged out. You've clocked out. You're astral projecting somewhere else.
Like I said, so then we shouldn't hold people to their own standards. And when it comes to a question of stochastic terrorism, we can't hold anyone to any standard because it's ill-defined.
I think that going around accusing people of being a stochastic terrorist is a stupid approach. I think that's an issue with Vaush's approach. You're not going to get me to sit here to defend Vaush. I'm not a Vaush fan. I just think you're wrong. I think that, yes, yeah.
Or is it transgenocide?
Yes.
Do you think telling people to shoot people because there's a transgenocide would meet a definition, however ill-defined, of stochastic terrorism?
Everything meets a definition for anything. Your hat meets a definition of toaster. I can say the definition of toaster is staying on Rob Noerr's head, and then your hat meets it. That's not an argument, though, Rob.
It is an argument. The whole argument that you have is semantics. So for you to say that semantics doesn't matter now because anything could mean anything, for example, me saying I could defend this could mean I'm defending the words that I said, couldn't it? Because
what are you talking about?
Your entire argument with me is that you don't want to debate the topic of do I stand by my tweets. Instead, you want to debate the topic of does this prove that Vaush is a stochastic terrorism? So
no, not does it prove it. Not does it prove it. Not does it prove it. Just, is it indicative? I'm not asking does it prove it. Just, is it evidence, Rob? Go ahead. You can speak now. It's your turn.
I'll wait for Micah, our vaunted moderator, who's doing such a good job.
I think he's just chilling. I think he's having a good time.
He's so salty. You talk over Sinthe as well, so I don't like to get super involved in every interaction. But yeah, you can go, Rob.
Micah. So again, the entire criticism you have is a semantic criticism, is what your argument is. And now, when I force you to say, okay, what is stochastic terrorism, since that's part of what we're talking about, because you want to get semantic, you default to sort of the postmodernist. But there is no truth, no words.
Not a postmodernist.
Please, anything could be anything. Your hat on your head could be a toaster. That's what you just said. So when your entire criticism of someone is semantic, then back to, okay, so the thrust of what we're talking about is you said something. Will you debate this topic on Twitter? I said, yes, I would debate it. Then in the DMs, I said, I'm willing to defend my tweets. You're saying, no, that's not good enough. So now what I'm saying to you is, who are you to say that I'm not defending the topic when you want a hat on my head could be a toaster? Words mean nothing. So who are you to say I'm not defending?
I don't think words mean nothing. I never said that. I said that by a definition, yeah, if that's your standard for saying that, like, you asked me by a definition of stochastic terrorism that's ill-defined, would Vaush meet that definition? Yeah, of course. Everyone meets a definition of everything by a definition that's ill-defined. I'm not a postmodernist. I just walked into a discussion with you, told you I was a moral realist, and now you're shouting postmodernism at me. I think words do have meaning. I think the meaning is not defined by a set of more words. I think the meaning is defined by things like family resemblance.
Okay, can you explain how the hat in my head could be a toaster?
If somebody defined toaster as things on Rob Noerr's head, then the hat on your head would fit the word toaster.
What was the utility of bringing that up?
To explain to you that a word can have a definition that's totally arbitrary, but that doesn't mean that it's well defined.
Okay, so can you read me again what the initial statement you said to me was, and then what my response was? Go ahead.
The initial statement and the proposition of is this tweet indicative that Vaush is a stochastic terrorist? Mm-hmm. Yes, that was the initial proposition. Yep, I'm in.
Okay, so I define yep, I'm in, and my definition of yep, I in is I'm willing to defend the statements that I've made.
No, it isn't. You think you're just gonna lie about your words?
Yeah.
Your definition of
someone defines it as such.
You think by yep, I'm in. When somebody gives a proposition, you think what a normal person would interpret that to mean is like, yes, I will only defend my verbatim quotes. I will not defend any obvious implications I'm making, including the proposition I agreed to.
So wait a minute. What do you mean normal person? A normal person would
sane people.
Is a toaster, but that's what you said. So
I agree. That's the point.
Now what you're saying?
What?
From the conversation, you're laughing your stupidity, right?
So true. So true.
So when you tried to make up semantics because you can't defend that you misread what I said, so you tried to make about semantics, and then when we get into the meat, we think that what Vaush said was stochastic terrorist. You brush it off as words could mean anything.
No, they can't.
And you literally,
oh my God.
If someone chooses to define the hat in your head as a toaster.
Rob, that was a critique. I wasn't saying this is a good thing to do.
I can talk.
Go ahead, Rob.
Go ahead, Rob.
We could say that when I bring it back to, okay, well, if that's the case, then words wouldn't have meaning. I could choose to define the words I want in this topic. You're like, obviously that's stupid because rational people, yes, which is the critique I was making of you. You running from the term stochastic terrorism by saying it's ill-defined, therefore I don't have comments on it, is absurd because what we should do is either one, hold people to the standard that they themselves, or second, look at it in a way that we could.
He's just crazy. He's not going to get it.
So I ask you again. There's a transgenocide and we need to shoot people that we disagree with stochastic terrorism.
So, but can I address all of the dumb shit you said before I talk about your question? You can ask it again if you think I dodged. Right? But there's a lot of dumb shit. There's a lot of dumb shit you said. Like, you completely misunderstood the toaster example. I'm not saying you should go around calling your hat a toaster. I was giving you an example of a... Oh, he's just leaving? Goodbye, Rob Noerr. It was nice meeting you. Yeah, I don't know. He's grabbing some water or something. He's a thirsty guy. We'll wait for him to get back.
I'm sorry, I missed the end of it.
You missed all of it.
I heard you saying that you weren't saying that you were defending toaster. What you're doing was, and then that's what I cut out.
Yeah, so the whole point of that toaster thing was to give you an example of an absurd position. It's called a reductio ad absurdum, right? This is a big nerdy word to just describe a position that's silly, right? I'm saying here's an example of somebody who could hold the same standard you do, and they'd be silly for doing it. You shouldn't just go around using words totally arbitrarily. Words should be used based on what's useful. So what did you ask?
Again, the question is, if someone says there's a transgenocide and we should shoot people that we disagree with, is that stochastic terrorism?
I think that the term stochastic terrorist is ill-defined. I just told you that several times. Pay attention. Rob, where are you?
I'm here debating someone who's a debate bro that can't...
A debate bro. Name a position of mine I've not defended. Name a single position of mine I haven't defended.
You haven't defended whether or not this is stochastic terrorism by trying to say, I think the term...
When did I call it stochastic terrorism?
I just asked if you think that these criteria would meet stochastic terrorism.
And I just asked what's a position of mine you're trying to get me to defend. And then you said that I hold the position that it's a stochastic terrorism?
You can't defend anything because as soon as it gets to something that would prove to the meat of this topic, you say, well, those words are ill-defined, I can't speak on it.
I think the term stochastic terrorism is ill-defined, and I think I proved that because I got you to give me your definition that you thought was the good standard, and your definition applies to people who you don't think it applies to. There are examples of it's bad conceptual analysis.
Again,
you disagree that it defines...
Again,
okay.
It's the same argument that you see the left make all the time.
So true. Look, you cut me off, and if I cut you off, you bitch that the moderator's being unfair to you or something every time it happens, right? So, Rob, I want you to understand. The point of me telling you this is I think that your definition that you gave out loud was poorly defined. Your definition was one that includes, your definition was someone who intentionally incites someone to commit an act of violence. And I said, are you sure about that? And then you said, if it would be terrorism. And then we talked about what is terrorism. And you said, when you use violence for political ends. And I'm telling you, yes, the founding fathers incited other people to use violence for political ends. They rallied people together to overthrow the British government. And now you want to say it only counts if it's done by a non-state. And the founding fathers were a state, and ISIS is not. But that's just not true, because ISIS was in fact a state. They did have a monopoly of force, and the founding fathers did not. So by the normal political science definition, ISIS wouldn't be terrorist according to you, and the founding fathers would be terrorist according to you. That's how poor this definition is.
A nation or territory considered as an organized political community under one government.
Yes.
Germany, Italy. Is ISIS that?
Yes, of course they are. Yes.
They have states. They're not recognized under one government.
What do you think a government is? Do you think the 50 states aren't a government?
Give me another nation state that recognizes ISIS as a state. Go.
ISIS is literally called the Islamic State.
Right, so give me a country, give me another state that recognizes them as a state.
Obama called them ISIL.
What is the boundaries of the state of ISIS?
You think that you can't have an ill-defined border on a state?
So give me where.
Like Syria and Rojava both have ill-defined borders? Their borders have changed over time. They used to be very large, now they're much smaller.
Make them a map. Show me the borders of ISIS.
You want me to draw a map for you in the middle of this debate? I should open up MS Paint and draw you a map.
You don't have to draw it. Surely they exist if they're a state.
They've changed borders over time, like many states have. The United States has changed borders over time. They have rough, approximate borders the same way Rojava does.
Would any of the countries that the state of ISIS exists in argue that the land that ISIS is claiming to govern over is not their land?
Of course, there are people. There are people who reside in America right now who claim that it's not America's land. And they say give our land back. There are a lot of Native American individuals who would say that America is operating on stolen land, that it's not America's land. It's not the rightful land of America. It's stolen. The same is true for ISIS.
A religious sect in the United States that were white supremacists bought a bunch of property in the woods and said, "This is our state. We govern it." Is it their state?
I don't think they have a monopoly of force over it.
Well, so a monopoly of force would imply if there's some physical and if there's some group that's physically fighting back against them, they don't have a monopoly of force.
If they're fighting back against them, but if they can't maintain control and governance over that area, then it's not the case they have a monopoly of force. If it was the case you had some breakaway, like the southern states of the U.S. or something, and they were actively able to maintain governance and law, then they would be a state.
They're not a state. They're an insurgency, is what they are. They don't have a government. They don't have
holy shit,
steady borders and the things that we normally consider with a state.
You think a state has to have steady borders?
You're semantically trying to get out of the debate. And the irony is, when I ask you to...
Did the founding fathers have steady borders?
Please, when I ask you to define terms that are...
Just want to answer that.
The actual topic is, you say, well, these things are ill-defined, so I can't speak on them.
Which of the...
You can see what you're doing. Everyone can see...
You can't possibly be trying to gesture to the audience at this point, right? You're clearly... Look.
I don't have to appeal to the audience, right?
Everyone can see. Like, come on now.
I'm appealing to the objective.
Everyone can see that you're just weaseling. You've spent the entire debate weaseling.
Let's talk about something else that you said. You said that...
What have I said? Let's talk about something else. You want to move on, Rob?
Well,
go ahead. Name a single thing I've said. Go ahead.
You think that thing? So I'll just keep asking the question. We won't move on. And then people can see for yourself. Do you think the word... dangerous is ill-defined?
The word dangerous? It might be ill-defined. I think there's a good definition for it. Okay, go
ahead. What's the definition of dangerous?
I think that there's some threshold of probability somewhere where we say that this thing being like, maybe it's like 1% or 2% probability of it causing a negative utility. That would be the kind of thing where we'd say it's dangerous.
1% or 2% of causing you negative utility is...
Yeah, that would be dangerous, yeah.
So water.
Dangerous. So water's dangerous?
Yes.
I don't think there's a 1 or 2% of you drinking water and it causing you some kind of issue.
Water is dangerous. We can make that claim.
No. No.
You don't think that? So how many thousands of people need to drown every year before you would consider water dangerous?
It would have to be 1 or 2% of the people who come into contact with water.
I think that we can see just to be clear. So are guns dangerous?
Guns are pretty dangerous.
So you think that 2% of people that come into contact with guns every year are killed by them?
That's not the position. We're talking about negative utility, not death.
Okay.
What are you doing? You're a joke. This is a waste of my time. You're a goober. I'm doing a goober debate.
When you said 1 to 2% of people that come into contact with water would die, right? Isn't that what you said?
I said they don't cause negative utility.
Okay, so negative utility could be like water damage to your house.
Water, yes, I don't think 1 or 2% of the people who come into contact with water are being caused negative utility on net by the water.
I'd say that there's probably a good chance that in some form of negative utility of water, 1% of people that come into contact with it are
Not any amount of negative utility, but negative utility is a negative utility. Not like they stubbed their toe on the water, Rob.
You lied. So you lied. You originally said
I didn't lie. I didn't. No, I said negative utility the whole time.
Let's go back. Let's go. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Let's go back and see.
You want to scroll back and see me saying negative utility? That was my original definition, was 1 or 2% chance of negative utility.
People that come into water die, I believe is what you said.
I might have said that in regards to water, but my original definition was 1 or 2% of negative utility? And everyone remembers this? You're crazy.
So you're saying you might have said that about water, but now you misspoke?
I don't even think I said that about water. I'm telling you, my original definition was 1 or 2% of people come into 1 or 2% of people who come into contact with something have to experience negative utility. And in regards to water, you said that you think like there are some people who drown, right? That's what you invoked. You invoked drowning, and then I responded with, I don't think 1 or 2% of people who come into contact with water drown, or something along those lines. And I agree, I don't.
Did you say die?
In the course of the conversation, I probably said die once, yeah?
Sinthe did say drown, but that was like in the context.
Okay, so you didn't say any negative utility. You said drown, which is definitely.
What are you doing, Rob? Rob, my original definition for what it means to be Listen, Rob, stop spazzing, Rob, relax. Meltdown, Rob, relax, listen. I'm gonna help you, Rob. No, Rob, you're going crazy.
So
let's not talk over each other. Rob, Sinthe's gonna finish.
Yes.
One statement, then you can go.
Yes. Rob, listen. What I said, you asked me what's the definition of dangerous, and I initially, from the get-go, gave you a very clear definition, which is probably about 1 or 2% chance of experiencing negative utility. And then you said, what about water? Don't you think that what about drowning or something like that, right? And then I told you, I don't think that 1 or 2% of people who come into contact with water drown. And if you want, you can go watch it back and you can go see for yourself. But I never changed my definition to be about dying. My definition was dying from the get-go. And if you like, this is going to be super boring, but what me and you can both do, because it's been about an hour in, we can pause right here and we can watch back the entire train of dialogue. It hasn't been that long since I invoked my original definition. You can go scroll back to my original definition and we can watch it together. Because I said in my original definition, negative utility.
You can go.
Okay, so when he said negative utility, he did talk about 1 to 2% of people drowning, is what he said.
You talked about drowning. Oh my God.
Don't interrupt.
Okay, yeah.
Go, Rob.
So when I went to guns, I said, do you think 1 to 2% of people would have died by guns? He said, well, they wouldn't have to die. It could be other things, right? So that's how we got there. The reason that I said die was because that was the implication that you gave with drowning. Do you think 1 to 2% of people that come into contact with guns have negative utility of it?
Yes.
Explain.
So we're going to have both the people who die. We're going to have the people who get injured. We're going to have the people who get injured by others. We're going to have the people who get scared on average by guns. All of these people are sufficient to be at least 2%. It's a wildly large number of people who come into contact with guns. Having a gun in your household has like a wildly higher chance of like suicidality, wildly higher chance of things like a crime being committed by one person or another, a chance of injuring yourself accidentally. There are a lot of dangers to guns. I don't think this is in dispute. I think like 1 or 2% is conservative.
The point that I'm trying to make with this is that the definition you gave is subjective, right? And now you've extrapolated out to, it's not just that you had a negative consequence, it's that you could be scared. That was something. Well, now we could look at that definition.
I said negative utility. Rob, you're not listening, right? You stop talking sometimes to do this weird like gesture that you think is going to make you look good or like be good optics or something, but you're clearly not using those times of silence to listen. I said negative utility. I didn't say it's the case that it has to fucking kill you. All right. Look, at this point, Rob, what we can do is we can either go back and we can rewatch the thingy, or it's the case that we can We can both do closing statements or something. It's been about an hour. We've been talking for about an hour now. Which one do you want to do? He's just sitting there. He's like frozen. I don't know. I guess closing statements it is. Rob, you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
I'll wait for the moderator to say when I can speak, because I know you'll jump in.
I actually lagged out. I don't know if you saw that I lagged out. I just got back. You can speak, Rob.
Thank you, Micah. I appreciate that. When you say things like negative utility, right? When it comes to water, you were just saying like, the people that are harmed by it and things like that. Now that we see that utility, which is also a word that's not easy to define, or negative utility.
It's pretty easy to define.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
So, for example, now it's extrapolated to getting scared. For example, my son got scared of rain that was coming down hard the other day. I'm sure there's children every year get water would be something that would scare them, whether they see fast water in a river. There's people that go canoeing that get scared sometimes about the water. So this would probably put that number over 1%. If 30 million people in the United States, for example, had a fear of any sort of home damage, water damage to their home or their property, or drowning, the people that are physically hurt by some sort of water, or that they were at a waterfall or something was intimidated by the waterfall, that would meet that definition. Now, the reason we're on this is nonsense anyways, because what I'm trying to prove is some sort of word that we could say that it's bad to say there is a transgenocide, which is bullshit, and then say we should shoot people we disagree with. The term that Vaush uses, stochastic terrorism, I'm trying to hold him to his own standard. When asked specifically what I define stochastic terrorism, he goes to this ad reductum trying to say, well, but there's other things. How do you define state? How do you define terrorism? Then when I ask him to define words, he's like, well, they're ill-defined. They're just ill-defined. For example, he says that there's a transgenocide. Maybe that's what we could get into with the debate. Can you define genocide, that there's a transgenocide?
Yeah, it's the mass killing of a group of people on the basis of immutable characteristic, but I also want to address the thing that you just said because it was really stupid. The thing that you just said about water was there are people who get scared by it, but what you've forgotten, Rob, is that without water, those people die. So they're actually, even those people are gaining more from water than they're losing from it. So they have positive utility from water. So if you want to talk about genocide, we can do that too. We can talk about whatever you want.
No, don't talk over him. You get upset when that happens to you.
Yeah, we could talk about. He's so upset. Look. Honestly, this has been like an hour of like great content. Like we both, Rob, both of us have it.
Terrible.
I love it. I'm loving the content, right? Do you wanna? We can go some. We can keep the conversation going and go like the genocide route that you want to talk about, right? The mass killing of a group of people on the basis of individual characteristic. We can talk about that. Or what me and you can do is we can both do closing statements. Which one do you want to do?
Don't talk to the stupid thing that you just said. So now you've changed your definition again, where originally you said if there's some sort of negative utility. Now you say, but if there's positive utility, that somehow weighs in. Well, there's tons of positive utility to guns as well. He keeps
oh my God.
The definition. The idea that just because water is necessary to live would have nothing to do with whether or not water could be dangerous. For example, vehicles are dangerous, right? But vehicles have very much positive utility. In fact, they have far more positive utility than negative utility. But we would still all say that vehicles are dangerous because we understand that the negative utility outside of the potential for positive utility still exists. So the fact that he's now changing and saying, well, even if it is true that 1 or 2% of people could have had negative utility with water, well, the fact that they have positive utility proves that it wouldn't be dangerous. That's absolute nonsense. Everyone can see.
Yeah, this is the most goober attempt I've ever heard in my life of trying to like pin somebody down on something. Rob, if you're saying that cars aren't dangerous, you're just confused about what utility is. It's about the aggregate. It's not about like the fact that there are good things and bad things in everything. Like, yeah, there are good things and bad things in houses. When we're talking about the utility, we're talking about, is it a positive or a negative? Is it the case that it's if you take the pleasure minus suffering, does that number come out to be positive or does it come out to be negative? And in the case of guns, there's a lot more people that it comes out to be negative for than in the case of things like water. In the case of water, it'd be really bad if you didn't have water, Rob.
Are automobiles a positive or a negative?
I think that automobiles are on aggregate a positive, but there's a lot of people who are harmed by them. Yes, of course they are.
Oh, okay, so then how do we do this equation?
You take a look at the portion of people who come into contact with this thing and see, is it the case this ends up being positive or negative for these group of people? In the case of automobiles, you have a tremendous amount of automobile deaths per year that we can look at. I said death again, it's going to get confused.
It's not that. What about fear and things like that?
What about fear?
You said that it's not just S, it's utility. Things like fear would be negative utility.
Yes, Rob. Do you think that the people who get fear from the automobile gain more than they lose from it?
Yes.
There you go, dummy.
Do you think that people that gain more than they lose of guns get positive utility or negative utility?
I think that more than 2% of people are getting a net negative from guns.
The point is, when you made the question about dangerous, right? It has nothing.
You made the question about dangerous.
No. When you
asked that.
When you gave the answer to the question about dangerous, you only mentioned negative utility. Now you're saying
Yes.
And you were very specific. You said 1 to 2% of people had a negative utility. Once shown that probably meets that metric with water, you said, but people also have positive utility.
No, Rob, you're confused.
Please.
Oh my God.
Some nebulous formula where it's like, well, it's not just did 2% of people have a negative utility, whatever the fuck that is, right? Which is
pleasure minus suffering.
Okay, causes minor suffering, which we can see that water, 1% of people would meet that.
Pleasure minus suffering.
Wait, 1% at a time, 1% at a time.
Okay.
Wrap it up really quickly so Sinthe can
Yeah, that's fine. Pleasure minus suffering. Okay.
Okay. Do you think that for 98 or more % of people who come into contact with water, do you think that their contact with water ends up being a positive number if we do pleasure minus suffering, or a negative number?
It depends. Are we talking individual time?
We're talking individuals.
No. Okay, so not individual time. So, for example, if I come into contact with water 1,000 times in a month, but one of those times it flooded my house and took it away, for me, the individual, as one person, water is negative utility.
No? Water would have a positive utility? You'd be dead without it? Your pleasure minus suffering, your lifetime pleasure minus suffering, would that number be in the positives or the negative because water exists?
So water is not dangerous. It's never dangerous. Got it.
Water is sometimes dangerous, but water itself is not dangerous. There are cases where water is dangerous. There are cases where, like, for example, in a river. Rivers are very dangerous, Rob. Rivers are more dangerous.
Get out of semantic Sam here, right?
Semantic Sam.
You're expanding his own definition.
You asked me the definition of this word. Oh my God. I did it like several times. Just remember the answer I gave you.
Go ahead. Say it again.
Just remember it.
Say it again.
No, remember back to the conversation when you asked it last time. Look, this man's going to keep asking the same questions over and over and over again. He's never going to remember that I said pleasure minus suffering. He's just going to get fucking stun locked on this. I told you this several times, Rob. Look, I don't know. At this point, it's been an hour. We got all the content we can. I was going to say that I got all the content, but this is boring. At this point, Rob, it's boring to both of us.
It is boring because
I will let you do your closing. Then can I do my closing? Is that cool?
You go ahead. You do your closing first.
You opened first.
What's that?
Oh no, you had me open first, but we both went back and forth a couple times. Never mind. I got you, right? Yeah, closing statement. Rob could literally address nothing. He bombed massively. That's the end of my closing statement. It's that short. Go ahead, Rob. Go ahead and let's try to do 2 minutes.
Okay, right. Sinthe was unable to defend what this topic was supposed to be about. He accused me of misreading what this said because he misread what I said. I never said that this manifesto proved that this person was inspired by Vaush. I said that I wanted to have a conversation with Vaush about stochastic terrorism because based on his definition of what stochastic terrorism is, he's actually worse. And it was predictable at some point that because he's actually calling for violence and saying that there are things like a transgenocide, that he would be guilty of even worse what he's accusing the entirety of the GOP doing. That's what I was talking about. A bunch of people, including Vaush and a bunch of people on the left that defend him, wanted to say that there's no evidence that because Vaush was a terrorist, that means that this person didn't like Vaush. It doesn't necessarily mean that. We didn't get into it because Sinthe doesn't want us to debate. Now, Sinthe asked if I was willing to debate this and I misread. I didn't misread. Sinthe misread what I was talking about, which is proven by the fact that he said that I misread it, which meant that he asked that topic because he thought
he's so deeply confused.
I said, I will debate this topic. I read to you in the...
Unironically, I've never in my life met an individual who's more likely to just ignore the prop that you agree on and then just start rambling. He's just wild. This was a lot of fun. This is a lot of fun.
Wants to argue semantics and change definitions just like postmodernists are wont to do.
No, he's calling you postmodernist again.
But then he'll default to things like you have to be a toaster.
He's so...
I'm not sure.
Why would he call back to that? That was his worst point of the debate.
Things that you would do if you want to...
Maybe that wasn't. Maybe he's had a lot of bad points.
We could see that that Micah was a terrible moderator as well.
Micah was great.
In to help Sinthe when it was me.
What?
Not doing the same when Sinthe was. He also
That's so crazy.
reasonable claim that people that
Like 40 times in the debate, Mike would be like, "Sit, stop interrupting." Mike was so nice to Rob.
you should be careful when you're telling them that there's a genocide against them.
1 minute and 40. Let's see how long it goes.
That they should go out and shoot people. The truth is that people like Micah, who's not very good in the field of economics, as we've already talked
What? Micah bodied Rob Noerr in economics. That's crazy. Me and Rob have both debated Micah on econ.
He's unable to.
Oh, I know. I'm mentally ill. Okay.
That we see from them, and so he has to argue these semantic things and draw.
There's your 2 minutes, Rob. There's your 2 minutes. Take a breath.
It's over, Rob.
Take a breath. Jesus.
I intervened to help you a lot more than I intervened to help Sinthe. So I don't even know what that's about. But okay, that was interesting.
We'll see you.
I love you, Rob. You have a good one. That was crazy.
Bro,
We're still.
I feel like I was biased towards him because he kept getting pissed. Like, what?
I know. That's what I was just saying to the audience. Like, I don't know how you could possibly criticize Micah for like not like you. There was like maybe 2 times in the entire debate that you were like, "Hey, Rob, stop and let Sinthe speak," and like 40 times where you did the inverse.
He got so pissed off whenever you'd say like one word. Oh my god.
Like, I actually, like, unironically, I appreciate how unbiased of a moderator you are, because if you came in here and you were like wildly biased on my side, it looks like it just like stacked things, right? Like, that was, I can't imagine why that would be Rob's jab there. It was like attacking the moderator. The world's least
Economics. That's crazy. That's crazy.
I mean, there was like a 3-hour debate between you and Rob, in which Rob did not do super exceptional throughout the course of it. So I don't. Maybe he's still salty about that. But me and you have debated econ before, so like I don't. Yeah. I didn't come in here being so. I mean, we probably me and you have probably debated econ more times than you and Rob have even.
For sure.
All right, but
that was a shit show.
What did we expect? What do you expect? That was really enjoyable, but yeah, that was definitely a shit show. All right. My postmodernism was revealed in this debate.
The only thing I'm curious about, Sinthe, is I think on most points you were correct. The only one I didn't understand is since you were planning to talk about stochastic terrorism and whether this like manifesto implied that like Vaush was, like were you planning on just using a definition of stochastic terrorism that was like or terrorism that was built up with examples, or did you really not think that?
I was gonna give like an extensive definition. Or I was just gonna give Rob the floor and say like, give your definition, whatever one you use. If it's not just completely insane, it doesn't have some obvious reductio, we'll just use that, right? Rob at no point would even debate the prop though. So like we never even got into that. So it's unfortunate because I think it's actually a really interesting line is the definitions you can give for stochastic terrorism. But I think the real takeaway is unironically just like, don't go around accusing people of being a stochastic terrorist. What it does is it ends up like stifling free speech. It doesn't end up making things better. And Rob is like on the conservative side, the other side of things, like the ways that they portray lefties, you'd think that would be like the route he would take. It's not like Vaush is a stochastic terrorist or this is evidence Vaush is a stochastic terrorist, but instead that like the whole principle of calling people stochastic terrorist is something that like is an issue, which I take issue with. Yeah.
I got you. That makes sense to me. I think it was really interesting when it wouldn't say yes or no to that question.
That was crazy.
It's really not that hard.
It was. I
tried to clarify. I tried to say, okay, I think Rob's position is he doesn't think that's evidence, but then he was like, no, that's wrong, and it's like, well, then what's your goddamn position, man? Like, I don't understand.
Neither do I. The position is that Rob doesn't want to actively say that he agrees with my portrayal of his position, because then it's like, okay, what did Sinthe just like read your mind? How did I figure out the obvious implication here? So I guess that was the idea with Rob, is he didn't want to agree to that because it ends up being like, okay, well then now like clearly it is the case you agree to that prop. Clearly it is the case you think that's true. You're just like running away from it. I don't know. I thought it was crazy he agreed to this proposition. I thought that was like a crazy proposition to agree to. So I am not surprised that when we got into it, he did the thing where he tried to run away from it. That's what I've been talking so much shit about Rob, predicting exactly this. Like, Rob's going to get it. We're going to get into it. What's going to happen is like, Rob's going to try to move away from the actual proposition because there's no defense for it. But no. I finally have content to upload on my channel. I finally streamed it live. The Sinthe viewers, they'll get something. for once. They get their yearly upload. So I guess we'll, unless there's anything you want to maybe you want to shout yourself out or something, and then we could stream.
Once again, Micah Irfan. Okay, I already spelled it earlier previously. You just type in micahirfan.com and you can find the links to all of my stuff. It's
true. And I'll spell it again just in case for the people who just tuned in. MICAHERFAN.com. Go ahead and look at all of Micah's stuff.
That economics, maybe. I don't know. Find out for yourself. Read my newsletter, and you can leave a comment, and you could say, you know what, Rob Noerr was right. We're very bad at economics.
All right. Well, you stream people have a good one. Yeah, don't worry, Astra. I can't see the full name here, but I will upload it. I